Hello there and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we are taking a look at the cars of the recently released Formula Drift Pack which came out with this game, which was the pre-order bonus for Forza Horizon 4. You got the cars in Horizon 4 as well as getting the cars for Forza Motorsport 7. We begin with the 1989 BMW 325i Formula Drift car, 750 horsepower, 750 foot-pound torque, 2,800 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful car here today and the lightest car here today and the car with the least amount of torque. And that gives you a clue as to what these cars are. They're basically all insanely powerful. They're built for drifting, basically, as the name would obviously suggest. So these cars were never going to handle particularly well when it came to the Top Gear course. But, as it turns out, some did do better than others. And starting with this BMW, well, it gives us a taste of really what's to come. It is stupidly fast. It's insanely quick, this car. It's one of the fastest sort of top speed cars. A lot of these cars are some of the absolute quickest cars we've ever had in terms of straight line acceleration once you can get the power down. However, they are very difficult to drive. You do need a lot of throttle control to make sure these things don't go sideways all the time, because as much as they're built to go sideways, at the end of the day going sideways, it's not indicative of having a good lap. And also quite a lot of them do suffer from a lot of understeer. Sorry, I don't know if that's just to do with the way the front end's set up on them, but a lot of them do suffer from understeer. Next up we have the 1995 Nissan 240 SX Formula Drift car, 830 horsepower, 810 foot-pound torque, 2,900 pounds of weight. We come to, well, the main meat and potatoes of this pack, which is, well, 3 240 SXs, and this is the first of them. This is the most subdued of all of them, being the least powerful one out of the lot. In fact, this car's probably got one of the worst power to weight ratios of any car here today, which is interesting. However, when we're dealing with such power, and the cars don't actually weigh all that much, yeah, that doesn't really say a whole lot. As far as this car goes to drive, honestly, this one might be my favourite of all of the Formula Drift cars in terms of just how they drive, because this one's the most normal to drive. Does the rear end still try and escape on you? Yes, of course it does. But for the most part, throttle control wise, you don't need to be massively vigilant on it. It's not a massively difficult car to drive. It turns in reasonably well. The brakes on it are alright. The brakes on all the cars here today are a little bit weird, just because obviously the cars are so quick. The brakes don't feel as effective as maybe they should. But this one is the best driving one. Spoilers, but yeah, this one's my favourite. This was my favourite car to drive today. Next up, we have the second of our 240SXs in the 1996 Nissan 240SX Boss Kit Formula Drift car, 1,154 horsepower, 1,119 foot-pound torque, 2,800 pounds of weight, of course tying it with the lightest car with the BMW 325i, which was the first car we featured. The previous 240SX I described as the best handling car from this pack, and this one not so much. This one is one of my least favourite cars from this pack. It's a very tricky car to drive, as you can probably tell by the amount of oversteer I'm getting through that corner. You can see how much it's wiggling. Yeah, you can see the issue with this car straight away. Getting the power down in this car is very difficult and not massively possible. The rear end has no grip in this car. I'm not quite sure what the situation is between why it's doing that with this car and not with the previous car. The previous car had a decent amount of rear end grip. This one has literally no rear end grip whatsoever. It's a foreign concept to it. It's a really hard car to drive, this one. Not one I'd particularly recommend for anything. It is, in my opinion, the best looking car from this pack, so I guess that's something. I really like the Boss Kit 240SX, and I quite like the livery on this with the AEM sponsorship. But as far as a car to drive, yeah, this one is best avoided, in my humble opinion. Even if you want to drift, I wouldn't particularly recommend that one. Next up, we have the car with the longest name out of this pack, the 1997 Nissan 240SX S14.5 conversion Formula Drift car, 1,250 horsepower, 989 foot-pound torque, 3,100 pounds of weight, tied for the heaviest car here today. This particular one is the most powerful of all the 240SXs, and again, it is the heaviest of all the 240SXs. So this one, really wasn't sure how this one would drive. On paper, this one technically probably should be the worst of all of them, although then again, it does have a diminished torque figure compared to the Boss Kit car, so whether it will or not, well, what happened? It's somewhere in between. It's not as nice to drive as the other 240SX, the Rain X car, but it is better than the Boss Kit to drive. It sort of mixes the two quite nicely. I think it thankfully inherits more from the first 240SX than it does from the Boss Kit car. There's still not all that much rear end grip. It will try and go sideways from you. It's still a very tricky car to drive, and it's very quick. But it is better than the Boss kit. It has actual rear end grip, which is nice. It's also a pretty good looking car, I guess. I'm not a fan of the S14, but putting the S15 front end on the car does help things a little bit. Moving away from Nissan Silvias, we move to a car which I never really thought would ever be in Formula Drift, but there you go. It's the 2006 Dodge Viper SRT10 Formula Drift car. 1,350 horsepower, 1,400 foot-pounds of torque, 2,900 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful car here today. And it is also the torquiest car here today. In fact, it might be one of the most powerful and torquiest cars we've ever had, if it's not the absolute pinnacle of it. I believe the Unicorn might have more power, but in terms of foot-pound of torque, 1,400 is an awful lot to put through the rear wheels of the car. And, well, the Viper shows it. This is too much power. You want to know what too much power is? This is too much power. It eats the rear tyres alive. I know the rear tyres are huge, but my god. Yeah, this has too much power. It wheel spins non-stop through the first 3 gears. By 4th gear, it's not too bad, but by 4th gear, you're doing about 150 miles an hour, and you have to brake into the next corner. This is not a fun car to drive. You seriously need some good throttle control. If you want to learn how to drive without traction control on, this might be a good car to pick up, because if you can handle this, you can handle pretty much anything a car will throw at you. The Viper is not a car to be taken lightly. It takes no prisoners. It's stupidly powerful. It has too much power. Next up, we have the 2015 Ford Mustang Formula Drift car, 986 horsepower, 852 foot-pound torque, 3,100 pounds of weight. Again, tied for heaviest car with the S14.5 conversion 240SX. This Ford Mustang on paper is one of the more subdued cars here today. It does have under 1,000 horsepower, which is nice. I guess it makes a nice change from the Viper to experience something with as little power as this one has. I say as little power, it's still 986 horsepower. As far as this one goes to drive, it is a nice car to drive, certainly, especially coming out of the Viper. This feels way more controlled. I could basically put my foot down in almost any gear, and the Mustang wouldn't really complain all that much. You need a little bit of throttle control, but compared to the Viper, this thing is child's play. That being said, it is very understeery, very understeery. The Viper never really had the understeer issue, which a lot of these drift cars do have. This one does that. This one really, if you want to feel sort of how bad the understeer can be in these drift cars, this one's a good one to look at, because yeah, it really does suffer from it quite badly. Again, I think it's just something to do with the way the front track is, or maybe the way the front suspension set up. It's a little bit weird, but that is what it is. And finally today, we have the 2016 HSV Maloo Gen F Formula Drift car, 1,000 horsepower, 900 foot-pound torque, 2,889 pounds of weight. The only car here to have an odd number in the weight figure at the end, 2,899 instead of being 2,900. I don't know why it's £1 lighter than the other stuff, but regardless, it is here. Yeah, the Maloo, an interesting car, certainly not one that, again, I would particularly expect to be made into a Formula Drift car, but it's here, so there you go. As far as this one goes to drive, well, it's a Maloo, which didn't fill me full of much confidence, because of course with these sort of utes you have a lot of weight over the front end and not so much weight over the rear end, and as a result of that, yeah, this car does have a very light rear end. It doesn't take a lot to get this car's rear end out. It's probably the most tail happy car. This and the Boss kit, maybe up there with the Viper as well if he was bad with the Viper. Yeah, this really does try and get its tail end out, which, of course, you'd expect. It's a drift car. It is okay overall, though. Not a bad car to drive. Not one of my favourites. I'd say, honestly, if you're going to ask me for my favourites from today, the first 240SX, the rain car, and the Ford Mustang are both the best cars to drive. And the worst ones, Boss kit, the Maloo, and the Viper's quite difficult. But anyways, onto the leaderboard, and the fastest car today was the S14.5 conversion Formula Drift car, the 240SX with a 114.680, puts it in between a Dodge Viper ACR and a McLaren 650S, which is interesting to say the least. In 26th place, we have the Dodge Viper SRT10 Formula Drift car with 114.735. Despite having well over double the power of the ACR, it's nowhere near as good to drive as the ACR, and that's why it is down on its competition. In 27th place, we find the Nissan 240SX Formula Drift car, the Rain-X car, with a 114.940. My favourite car today beats out a Bugatti EB110 Supersport. In 29th place, we have the Ford Mustang Formula Drift car with a 115.064, beating out a Lamborghini Aventador fractionally, and a couple of McLarens. Yeah, the drift cars aren't slow. They are quite high up in PI. In 37th place, we find the Nissan 240SX Boss Kit Formula Drift car with 115.863, goes in between an Acura NSX and a Ferrari F40. That's about as good as that car could do. That is a really difficult car to drive. I had to try ridiculously hard to get a time like that. And finally today, in 48th place, we find the BMW 325i Formula Drift car, 116.806, goes in between a Ferrari F50 and a Jag XJ220. And in 52nd place, the HSV Maloo Gen F Formula Drift car, 117.273, goes in between a Ford RS200 Evolution and a Nissan GTR, making it the slowest car out of the pack. Interesting bunch of cars, really. They didn't handle better than I expected. They were certainly quicker than I expected, although I assume that's just down to the fact that they have a ridiculous amount of straight line speed. A weird group of cars. They certainly don't handle all the same. They're actually quite individual, which is kind of nice. It's sort of, I guess, the Hoonigan pack. All the cars in that sort of handled a little bit differently. Granted, they were on a much vaster scale. These cars are all S-Class, sort of low R-Class cars. So, yeah, they're not too bad. I wouldn't recommend them particularly for actual serious racing, but if you want sort of a nice little fun distraction, something different to drive, something mental to drive, then these cars are worth picking up. Again, for the final time today, my favourite are the 95 240SX Drift car and the Mustang. The Viper is a good training tool, and everything else in this package just sort of, I wouldn't if I was you, if you sort of want to keep your life. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching this edition of Forza Top Gear Laps. Next week, not quite sure what we're going to be doing, but stay tuned for it regardless. Thanks for watching. Until next time, farewell.